Amateur radio operators sure do love using codes and jargon. Am I right? Yeah, I'm right. And for a lot of people, that can be intimidating. It can keep them off the air. I mean, for some people who are a little mic shy, the idea of using a handheld radio like this to make contact with random people and make conversation with them, that can be tough enough to overcome. But then throw on having to know codes and jargon on top of it, it can be really difficult for some people. And it makes sense why so many technician class license holders never make a single QSO. I think that's sad. Well, I'm here to tell you that honestly, if you have a radio, you have your technician class license, you don't need to know any codes or any jargon to get on the air and have a conversation. You just don't. I'm going to repeat that. You don't need to know any codes or any jargon. If you're on the air and someone throws a code or jargon at you that you don't understand, just say, hey, I'm a new ham. What does that mean? And hams are friendly people. They'd be happy to tell you what that means and probably offer more help and assistance in the future. Today, I'm going to go over some of the codes and jargon, define it for you in case you want to know it before you do get on the air, and then I'll talk about the different modes of operation and how they use codes and jargon a little differently, and different codes, different jargon. Should be interesting. Let's get going. Oh yeah, and if you're an experienced ham, stick around, see what I have to say, see if I missed any codes or jargon, go ahead and put it in the comment section. Thanks. Today I'm at Cogburn Road Park in Alpharetta, Georgia. This is a small park. It's my first time here, but it's very nice and it's such a great day out. I just had to get outside. One of the things you might want to learn before you get on the air is how to say your call sign phonetically. Hams use the NATO phonetic alphabet, but if you're using it for your call sign, you can get creative. You can use pretty much any word that you want for your call sign. And I know a lot of hams that do this. They come up with a creative little saying for the last 3 letters of their call sign, or even the first few. They use creative words. It helps people remember your call sign, helps people remember you. So you can get creative with it, or just learn it in NATO. As you go along, if you do just learn your call sign, as you go along, you'll learn the rest of the alphabet. It's not that hard. And yeah, you don't have to memorize the whole thing up front. A lot of the codes that amateur radio operators use are Q codes. They're 3-letter codes starting with the letter Q, and they were first used by telegraph operators, yeah, back in the 1800s. Telegraph operators had to pound out every letter of every word in Morse code, so a lot of the common phrases and questions and exchanges that they would have, they just shortened to 3-letter codes. Makes sense. Today, it's still used, and you'll see a lot of Q codes all over ham radio and all different types of operation, from Morse code still being used in ham radio to even on the air on local repeaters, you will hear some Q codes. So let's talk about those. First is QSO. And QSO is just a two-way communication. So when someone thanks you for a great QSO, they're just saying, hey, that was a nice conversation, a good contact. They might also use it to say, oh, I had 5 QSOs today. That just means they talked to 5 different people. Real easy. The next one is QTH. Now, if you look this up on the internet, the original telegraph meaning is, where are you operating from? Well, hams use it as home. It's just another word for home. So they'll say, I'm at my QTH, or I'm arriving at my QTH. It just means they're home. Another one you'll hear very often is 7-3. That's actually a code for best regards. Hams usually end their conversations on all different types of communications. Even when they're on the internet posting messages to each other, they'll sign off with 7-3. Some people say 7-3s or 73. But the most common usage is just 7-3, and that's how hams end an on-air conversation. Next, you may hear on a repeater, you may not. I don't think you really need to know this one, but QSL. QSL can be used as a question, like, did you copy my transmission? Or it can be used as a statement, QSL, meaning I did receive your transmission. It's a pretty easy one. You more often hear this one on the HF bands. There's a couple regarding signal strength or signal quality that you might want to know. First is QRM. QRM, and that just means static or interference. If someone says, hey, can you repeat your transmission? There was some QRM. that just means something interfered with your transmission and you need to repeat it. And somebody might say there's no QRM, or the QRM in your transmission is gone. It just means static or interference of some type. The next is full quieting. You'd actually hear this quite a bit on repeaters. Somebody will say, if you ask how your signal strength is, like how do I sound, somebody might come back and say full quieting. Basically what that means is your transmission has enough power to fully quiet the repeater so there's no background static noise or QRM, and that's a good thing. So to have full quieting, that means your signal is very strong and good into the repeater. There's a couple pieces of jargon centered around how you're operating. The first would be mobile. Mobile is when you're in a vehicle and you can transmit while moving. So I've heard different things. If somebody just says they're mobile, more than likely they're in their car or truck. I have heard other types of mobile, bicycle mobile, motorcycle mobile. I even had a contact with somebody who was balloon mobile. Yep, they were up in a hot air balloon. So you can put some qualifiers on it. And typically if I'm out for a walk in a park like this and I'm having a contact or want to talk to somebody, I'll say I'm pedestrian mobile. Now mobile is different from portable. Portable means that you're using a station away from your QTH or your normal base, somewhere out remote, but you're not really moving. So you're essentially setting up a station somewhere other than your QTH. Another one you'll hear often on repeaters is clear, I'm clear, or clear on your final. It just means you're leaving the frequency or turning off your radio. You're gonna stop transmitting. When somebody says I'm clear, that means they're gone. Don't bother communicating with them anymore. If someone says clear on your final, that just means they'll leave after listening to your last transmission. So go ahead and say goodbye, say 7-3, thank them, whatever. And then after that transmission, you won't hear from them again because they're clear on your final. A couple other interesting codes that you'll hear on repeaters quite a bit is YL, which stands for young lady. So if you're one of the 2% of viewers on my channel that is a female and you're operating on ham radio, you'd very likely be referred to as a YL. In fact, my club has a YL net every Thursday night where ladies participating in ham radio get together on a repeater on Thursday nights and they have a net and talk about various topics. If you're a YL and would like to join that, the repeater's actually Echolink connected. You can join in from wherever in the world from your PC or phone and join that YL net. For information, go to nfarl.org, North Fulton Amateur Radio League.org, NFARL. I'll put a link in the description.
So I'm gonna jump in here real quick, and I guess some good jargon. By the way, name's Alex. Alpha Lima Echo X-Ray over in Buford, and some good ham jargon I think I didn't get initially starting off was XYL, the XYL, the ex-young lady, the wife. I didn't grab that one initially. I was like, what does XYL mean? What is the ex-young lady? Okay, that makes sense now that you married her. That's a good one. Reading the mail, as a lot of people do. They just listen, they don't talk, they just read the mail as they listen to the machine. That's a good one. I was just reading the mail, and had to jump in here, case in point myself. So there you go. Probably in the range of like taking a station break instead of saying using the restroom, take a station break. Those are my three.
Thanks, Alex. You actually threw in a fourth one too with machine, and that's one I know what it is. Obviously, it's a repeater. People refer to the repeaters as machines, but that's a good one. Last piece of jargon that's used quite a bit on repeaters is rig. A rig is basically your radio. So if someone asks what kind of rig are you running, or what kind of rig do you have, or do you have an HF rig, they're just asking about a radio. You can use radio and rig interchangeably. Because the communication using repeaters is usually really clear and doesn't have a lot of static in the background, or communication on repeaters is pretty easy. They don't use a ton of codes and jargon. A lot of it just carries over from single sideband voice communications. Now when you get into the HF, or you're even doing long range 2 meter or 70 centimeter work on single sideband, because there is static, because you're dealing with the noise and trying to maybe decipher weaker signals, more jargon and especially codes are used. So let's talk about those. First, there's a couple codes and even a piece of jargon related to power. You're going to hear QRP, and if you've watched some of my QRP videos, that just means low power. Now, definitions of what low power is change a little bit depending on the contest or who you're talking to, but typically I think most hams would agree that QRP is 10 watts or less. Next is QRO, and QRO means high power. Now, it depends on who you talk to or what contest is defining what QRO power means, but I think generally speaking we can agree that it's 100 watts or more. Sometimes they define it as 200 watts or more, because a lot of the ham radio HF base station radios put out without amplification 100 watts. Which leads me to the next one, which is barefoot. You'll hear people say I'm running barefoot power. And what that means is there's no linear amplifier. So I might say on an HF band, I'm running my ICOM IC7300 barefoot. And anyone who knows the IC7300 knows that I'm running a maximum of 100 watts. So the big one to know for single sideband is CQ. CQ, CQ, CQ. People call it out all the time, CQ. And what that means is it's an invitation to have a QSO or two-way communication. So whoever's saying CQ is basically saying anyone who receives this transmission can come back to me. I'd like to make a contact with you. And it's used on both the HF bands as well as some digital modes. I mean, all over. Don't use it on a repeater though. That's a sure way to broadcast that you're brand new to the hobby. Don't use CQ on a repeater. You might actually catch some flack if you do that. Another very common Q code you hear on single sideband is QRZ or QRZ. Now, QRZ is a common website. Obviously, QRZ.com is a common website for hams to use, but it's also a way of telling people that you're available for communication. And it's most often used for a contesting station or a DX station that has a lot of people trying to contact them. What they'll do is they'll work one station, and when they're done with that exchange of information, the operator will say QRZ. And that will mean everyone can try to give their call sign again and try to make a contact with that lucky operator who's experiencing a pileup. A pileup is basically just a bunch of people trying to contact one operator. So you'll hear it quite frequently if there's a strong signal and he's calling CQ or QRZ. You'll hear in the background a bunch of call signs, and that operator has to pick one call sign out of the bunch to exchange information with and make that contact. Another one that's used all the time is DX. DX just stands for long distance contact. Now, maybe you can help me out in the comments section, because I don't know how far a contact has to be in order to qualify as a DX. Now, I do know that in the United States and even Canada, that people don't really consider, even if you're going coast to coast, they don't consider that to be DX. You pretty much have to go to another continent, Europe, South America, Asia, for you to be able to call that a DX contact. But maybe you can correct me in the comment section. All right, just a couple more. This one actually comes from Morse code, or CW as we call it in the hobby. CW stands for continuous wave, but it's hi-hi, H-I-H-I, and apparently when you hear it in Morse code, it sounds like laughter. Here, take a listen. Now, I don't know Morse code, but essentially hi-hi is laugh out loud. It's the original laugh out loud. They use it either to signify that they're laughing at what somebody said, or that what they're saying is intended to be funny. So hi-hi, that's an odd one. Now we come to rag chew. Rag chew is a great piece of ham jargon, and rag chew just means a long conversation or an informal conversation amongst hams. If you want to get on the air and have a conversation with somebody, you just say, hey, is anyone up for a rag chew? And that just means that you want to do more than exchange your location, signal strength, and call sign. You want to actually converse. Last but not least is lid. Lid is a bad operator, somebody who's making mistakes or that is considered doing things that go against what amateur radio operators should do. They get called a lid. So don't be a lid. Well, that's it for Codes and Jargon. I hope you learned something. And if you're new to the hobby or thinking about getting into the hobby, what I hope you learned was that you don't have to know any codes or jargon in order to get on the air. You can simply ask what it means, and hams are friendly folks. They'll help you out, especially if you say you're new. I thought it was fun when I hopped on my local repeater and asked for some input. Got to talk to a bunch of different people and get their inputs. That was fun. So a great day out here in the park. Got to talk to some folks and hopefully help you learn something. If I missed any codes or jargon that you think people should know, please go ahead and leave a comment and put it in the comment section. All right, this is K4BBL. I'm clear, 7-3.